doesn't care how many people have died. He doesn't really care about Ukraine. And I also think he doesn't really care about Russia. He only cares about how can he benefit himself to the maximum extent. So he's talking about this mineral rights deal with Ukraine, which I think President Zelensky will sign on Friday. We can get into the details to the best I understand them if you'd like. But
Sure.
also now I'm hearing Russia is talking about an aluminum deal with the United States. This is shocking to me. Vladimir Putin is saying he's willing to open up to U.S. investments, to American companies to help extract natural resources from the occupied territories of Ukraine. And Donald Trump being purely transactional, a person who doesn't care about human rights or democracy. Yeah, Donald Trump is interested. What can you offer me? Trump only cares about money and dollars, not human lives, unfortunately.
Do you feel that Vladimir Putin has already understood that he made a terrible mistake in 2022 by invading Ukraine? Don't you think that he has finally understood that now is the right time to stop the war, and he has a good chance to do that with Donald Trump? He can demonstrate this as a victory for him, but also can use Trump to survive, to save his own regime.
It's an interesting question. If Vladimir Putin could go back in time to 2022, knowing that it wouldn't be a special 3-day military operation, knowing that it wouldn't take 2 weeks tops, I don't know, because I think Russia has found, or at least Vladimir Putin has found a benefit to this war in that he's tested his people. Are his people willing to die for him at the rate of hundreds of thousands? You know, by the time this war officially ends, more than a million Russian soldiers probably will have died. And I think for a brutal dictator like Putin, he was concerned. You know, if he initiated these wars and people started dying, would his people rise up against him? That is the ultimate fear of any dictator. Will they storm the palace and then murder my entire family? And we've learned the last 3 years that the Russian people are entirely passive. They're entirely docile. They're willing to go along with any levels of brutality and crimes against themselves. The 3-year anniversary was this week of this invasion. And the only report I could find of Russians marking the anniversary or protesting was an 83-year-old woman in St. Petersburg. One 83-year-old woman was the only person in the entirety of Russia, 3 years into this disastrous war, that was willing to speak out and protest against Vladimir Putin. So, yes, Putin's economy has been wrecked, his military has been destroyed, but he's tested the boundaries of what can he get away with, both from the international community and from his own people. And I imagine at the moment, Vladimir Putin has to feel like a god. He has to feel like he's untouchable and can do anything he wants going forward. There are no international standards. There are no international norms that he has to adhere to or respect anymore going forward. Unfortunately, that's the world we now live in. I preferred to the world we were living in 4 years ago, in which people did care about international norms and respecting the sovereignty of nations. And there are no rules going forward, unfortunately. And I think this will lead to more destabilizing events, more chaos, more death, more confusion. I'm hoping that there's some way we can turn the tide in the political realm and reach Donald Trump and convince him not to go along with this, not to accept the new rules dictated by Vladimir Putin, how nations should treat each other, how the world should view itself. Because, yeah, this is generally not good for ordinary people like you and me when dictators say, I can redraw the maps, I can kill whoever I want to kill, I can take whatever I want to take. Might equals right, and I'm in the right as long as I have the power.
But US President Trump is confident that Putin will make concessions. Why does Trump think Putin is ready to concessions? Do you really believe that Vladimir Putin will make some concessions during negotiations right now?
That's a lie. Donald Trump is not really asking Putin for any concessions, and Putin is not willing to give any concessions. The Russians will always make absurd maximum demands. Vladimir Putin could say, I want control of everything all the way to Portugal. And then Donald Trump will say, well, will you negotiate? And I'll just give you all of Ukraine. And then Russia will say, okay, I'll willing to scale back my ambitions, wanting to go to Portugal or all the way to East Berlin. I'll accept just the Baltics, Moldova, Ukraine, Armenia, whatever. With the Russians, they have no right to anything. They have no right to this land. They have no right to these people, and they know that. So the Russians have been doing this really for centuries, just lying during the negotiations, demanding the maximum, and then waiting for weak political leaders to give them concessions. And then they argue that it was some kind of tough deal that they negotiated when they walk away something that they had no right to. And they've done this every single time. There is no treaty that Russia will sign that they will respect. There is no ceasefire that Russia will sign that they will respect. They will violate them at their first convenience whenever they think it's to their benefits. The Russians are liars, they're criminals, they're murderers, they're savages, and nobody should be taking anything they say or do seriously because they will never negotiate in good faith. They are terrible, terrible people.
So you're confident that if there is a ceasefire deal struck between Ukraine and Russia, Kremlin will violate this deal in any time in the future?
100%. If there is a ceasefire, and Ukraine knows this, General Budanov knows this, President Zelensky knows this, that if they do agree to some kind of ceasefire this year, Russia's not going to stand down. They're not going to demobilize their troops. They're not going to divert resources that going to the military back to civilian programs. Putin is in it to win it. He's getting no resistance from within his ruling elite and the country. And he's going to go for the Baltics. He's going to formally annex Belarus. He's going to go for the Suwalki Gap in Poland. He's going to go for Moldova. He wants all of Ukraine. All of Ukraine. Not just the parts he currently controls. And this can be a century-long project. Putin doesn't care. Perhaps he will die in the next 10 years of natural causes, and whoever his successor is can carry the mantle of Putinism and the rebirth of the Russian Empire. 500 years from now, when Russia controls half of Europe and Central Asia and the Caucasus, statues to Putin will be erected all across the Russian Federation. That's what he thinks about. That's what he sees. When you have this level of power and wealth and control, you start thinking about your legacy. You start thinking like Genghis Khan or Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar thought. It's about empire. It's about megalomania. These people don't care how many people die, both of the people they're invading and their own troops. It's just about their own insatiable lust for power. It's disgusting.
Also, General Budanov, the head of Ukrainian military intelligence, says that Ukraine and Russia are likely to strike a ceasefire deal this year. What is your personal prediction about the possibility of making a ceasefire deal this year?
Well, as anyone can see, the Russians on the front lines are using donkeys to get their artillery shells to the front lines. So yes, Russia needs to take a breather. And they will happily, I think, agree to a ceasefire. I imagine they want to do this prior to the May 9th Victory Day parade, just so they can consolidate their forces and have a big propaganda win. I don't know why May 9th is their most important holiday when Russia didn't exist during World War II. That was the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was one of the victors in World War II. The Soviet Union is gone. During World War II, 100% of Ukraine was occupied by the Nazis, but only 5% of modern-day Russia was ever occupied by the Nazis. I don't want to lecture you being a Ukrainian and the history of World War II, but it's simply about propaganda. All of the events, all of the stupid wars that Russia has participated in the last 80 years, they just pretend like none of that happened. So concerning the ceasefire, I think Putin wants one so that he can continue making tanks, continue making armored vehicles, continue making missiles and FPV drones, because that's where the future of warfare is going. And once he's stockpiled 6 or 7 million FPV